Tara Averill. This is Legacy of Loud, where we talk to people we admire and amplify messages worth amplifying.
And I'm Fiona. I'm her daughter, but I'm also a journalism student at Northeastern. And we brought you here today to talk about the Better Block Project. And yeah, we're excited to get into it.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk about it with you both.
Just a quick background. I'm a 16-year Brooklyn resident, 35-year New York City resident, and a creative entrepreneur that's been working in creative media in New York for 20 odd years.
Well, no, first I want to start with what is the Better Block Project and what do you guys do and how did you start it?
Yeah, of course. So my name's David. I'm the founder of the Better Block Project. I've been in New York cumulatively for 14 years. I'm actually originally from Texas, but I made my way to New York because I went to NYU for undergrad. And then I moved out of New York for a few years. I lived in Israel for a year, San Francisco for a couple of years, met my wife and had my first child in San Francisco. And then we moved back to New York 3 to 4 years ago now. And what the Better Block Project is we are a civic organization of a little over 100 people who are trying to solve problems for neighbors in Brooklyn. Specifically, the type of things that we work on is issues that you might call 311 about. So improving vacant buildings, cleaning up trash on the street, helping clean up bus stops. And what we try to do is truly solve these problems where the city is falling short. And we're oftentimes, you might get someone to stop by and fix something, but they won't truly solve it. And, that's what we're trying to accomplish. And what we hope this builds into is, a civic organization that can not only solve these problems, but also eventually pass policy to fix them more holistically. So yeah, it's been going on for I've been working on the problems, I would say, for about a year and a half now and formalized Better Block in the spring. And we've sort of just been growing since then.
So what inspired you to start it? Do you live in Brooklyn and you saw the neighborhood or how did that come to be?
So I live in Bed-Stuy and I, about a year and a half ago, started with an effort to try to improve this vacant property that was across the street for where my wife and our daughter and I live. I think, like many people, I come from an entrepreneurial background in tech and have been doing that for a really long time. I think, what I've gotten good at throughout my career is sort of solving problems. And I think like a lot of folks, I was sort of, I watch the news a lot. I'm on Twitter, whatever, and was sort of frustrated by the sort of helplessness that the news can give you and thought, I'm going to try to solve a problem in my neighborhood and really focus on that. And so there was this vacant building that was across the street from where we lived. And, I'd lived in that place for a few years. It had always been vacant. I sort of knew the context that there was an affordable housing crisis. And I was like, why is this building vacant? We should try to get it redeveloped to something much larger. So I started doing a bunch of research on it, was able to track down the woman who was the former owner of it and learned that, she had sort of formed a venture with a developer, and the intention was to build it into a much larger property. But COVID hit, their relationship soured a bit. And as a result, nothing ever happened. And this was sort of 5 years later, the building was sitting there. And so what we did was I tried to contact the current owner and say, hey, can you improve the building? They sort of, in so many words, said, no, we're not going to do anything. And, there was some trash frequently out front and, people would drink out front and there was always graffiti on it. And so what I did was all right, let me see if I can find other folks on the block and see if this is a problem for more people. And so I literally walked outside. We'd had people on Saturdays and Sundays who kind of just sit out in front of their buildings. I had never met them. And I was just like, hey, trying to get this building improved on the corner. Would you be interested in helping? And, people told me different stories. A lot of people had already known about it and had known the issues. I learned it had been going on for 25 years. And then I basically got connected to our block association, which had been sort of dormant for a few years, mostly because of COVID. And we had a block meeting. Turns out a lot of other people were interested in this vacant building, as well as other vacant properties on the block, which I wasn't as close to. And so we held a meeting with sort of all of the residents, had about probably 25 to 30 people there, invited our city council member, state senator, Jabari Brisbort came, and sort of asked everybody, what were you hearing about this vacant property? And heard all these kinds of stories of people getting punched in front of the building. One person's daughter, her window faced the building and, they would see people urinating out front frequently and just all of these issues that all of these people had also experienced around these vacant properties?
We live in Bed-Stuy. We live on Spencer Place down the street right off Fulton, and we had a dormant block association. I just want to echo some of your experience with my own and talk about it because I want to kind of not commiserate, but trade notes on how to actually affect change locally. Because I started a block association. They elected me president, and I'm having
Nice.
an unbelievably hard time getting anything done. So I just want to let you know that I want to ask you, as you're talking about this, you heard all these people, everyone had a complaint. I'm sure everybody called 311 at various different times,
Totally. Yeah,
and then can we just key in on this piece of the process for a minute? Like trying to get quality of life issues like you're talking about. We were told to call 311 as many times as humanly possible and to have a record. And we've been doing that, but it doesn't seem to do anything.
totally. It's really hard to affect change. Very, very difficult.
It's
We advocated for this vacant building to be improved. It took me, I started in April. It took 9 months to get an inspection. And the only way that happened was by consistently following up with the city council, who ultimately went up the change to the head of the Department of Buildings, who had to do a walk to inspect it, which was great to meet them. And I was grateful for them to be there, but sort of reflected, I think, of a flaw in the way the city is organized, that the only way I can get this building inspected is if the head of the Department of Buildings shows up. That's the only way it works, which to me is just shows it's not working for the day-to-day resident who's submitting a 311 complaint.
Mhm.
I think what I've learned throughout this process is it does require a lot of persistence in order to get any change that you want from the city. Oftentimes, the change that you're asking for is not necessarily the change that they will give to you. You might have an inspector show up, that inspector might give a fine. Will the building pay that fine? Will they actually change their behavior as a result of it? Like, resolving many of these issues can take years to get done. And honestly, I would say like I don't even feel like I've necessarily cracked the nut on what it means to solve these problems beyond like if you're very, very persistent. I've learned things along the way. If you're very persistent, if you can get neighbors together, that gets the city's attention more and will drive more progress.
Mhm.
But I think there's a role for block associations to just honestly do work themselves, you
Mm,
know, to
yeah.
clean up the street yourself, to put in community gardens yourself, and sort of like, whatever, it depends on the problem that you're solving, to try to work it out directly yourself, because I think it gives you one, it happens significantly faster than what might happen with the city, and it also gives you a lot more control over the outcome. But it's honestly something I'm still figuring out.
And I mean, this is kind of this the Better Ball Project is not your full-time job.
No, no, no.
Yeah.
I work in tech. I have a full-time job. I
So
also
it's
have
so
two
like, the
kids, and
point
so
I'm
I'm
trying to
doing this
make is
nights
it
and
is
weekends.
so hard for just a regular person living to try to call 311 a million times a day. Who has the time? And
Totally.
if this is your full-time job, how are you living? It can't be anyone's full-time job because there's no compensation for just being a good Samaritan and calling the city when something happens.
Totally, totally. And it's like it's very frustrating, because trash is, different parts of 311 sort of vary in their level of effectiveness. Like I've learned with trash on the street that Department of Sanitation is like reasonably responsive when it comes to trash and, will come and clean it up. But I think the city, one of the things I've learned about New York City is they often solve symptoms, but
Mhm.
don't solve the root issue of the
100%.
problems.
And like we have that massive trash dilemma on Fulton and Spencer.
Yeah.
And, everyone's like, call sanitation. And I'm like, sanitation's doing a great job. They're doing their job, which is to clean it up. But the whole idea of
It's
enforcement,
the root.
it's the root. And it's like people are dumping trash on foot. They're not dumping it with cars. And you can only
Mm.
get cars with the camera. So the cameras don't even help. So then the only way to do it is actually NYPD, foot patrol. When we've had, many conversations with them and we've emailed the new quality of life people, they literally don't answer one email.
I
Not
know.
one email from at least 5 of us have sent to the new emails of the newly appointed quality of life. And, and then when you speak to somebody, they're like, look, we're dealing with murders and real crime. Like your stuff is so petty. But these are the things that affect your soul on a daily basis. Garbage, rats, just what you're seeing and experiencing.
Which leads me to my next question, which is I know that my mom has experienced this, but as not a native to Bed-Stuy, pushback from the neighborhood and people who have lived there forever being like, this is the way it is. Have you experienced that? How do you deal with that?
Honestly, I haven't really experienced that. I mean, I'm definitely new to Bed-Stuy. Like, I've lived there for like 3.5 years now and, lived most of my time living in New York. I was in Manhattan and sort of made my way up the East Side. I think that I think the problems that, we've tried to tackle with Better Block, like cleaning the street, improving the bus stop, improving vacant buildings, I think many long-term residents of Bed-Stuy have the exact same problem.
I
And I
would
think in many
agree.
cases, many of them have been working on it for 20 years.
Yep.
And I think it's important to, like, there's been progress in that 20 years. Like, we've been trying to improve the bus stop on Franklin and Fulton. And I was at a meeting last night and talking to somebody who moved to Bed-Stuy in 1983. And he was like, listen, like, the block is way better than it was in 1983. It's significantly better. But everyone there acknowledges, like, we still don't want people, peeing in front of our house. We still don't want to have to deal with people using drugs in front of our house. And so I think, even though there has been a lot of improvement, I think people still, long-term I think it's an area where I've actually honestly found a lot of common ground with people where it's like people still don't want trash in front of their street. I would
No
also
one wants trash.
No one
nobody likes trash. Nobody
Nobody
likes
likes
trash at
trash,
the end of the
nobody likes
day.
rats, and, the time I have experienced this is the way it is and felt like because 'cause I'm technically a gentrifier by all definitions, is when I kind of confronted somebody about a shooting on the block, and they just didn't like me confronting them about a shooting. There was like a
Mhm.
little rash of shootings, and they kinda were like, you know they said it's summer in Brooklyn. And I was just like, and it's like, hey, lady, accept it. But around trash, rats, these are the common, and these empty lots. The empty lots are what kill me because when I dug deeper, we have a housing crisis, as you said, and I found out that they just can't get anything approved. Nothing approved. It takes forever.
Totally. I mean, your point on the shooting, like, listen, my car got hit by a bullet this summer, a stray bullet on July 3rd. That's what I woke up to because someone got shot on my block and that person was okay. And I'm literally like, like cleaning up. It didn't break my windshield, but like there's little bitty shards of glass that were like, on my kids' like car seats. And like,
Ugh.
I'm going through this process at like 9 o'clock in the morning on
Mhm.
July 4th. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what's the point? What am I doing?
Like, what is this
And
life? Like, I moved to New York. I'm like,
exactly, I pay outrageous rent and I'm dealing with this. And I went to the police and I I literally got the exact same phrase of you, of this is summer in Brooklyn,
yeah,
or
this,
this is summer in Bed-Stuy.
yeah.
And I think that the reality is, like, I mean, I've been to a fair amount of community board meetings, and I don't think anybody likes that acceptance. Whether you've lived
Mm.
here for 30 years or you've lived here for, 6 months, nobody wants to live in that environment. And I think everybody wants it to be safer. And it's just, for me with Better Block, it's just like objectively, like, I don't want to raise my kid in a place where the streets are dirty. I don't want to raise my kid in a place where think there might be some sort of violence as an issue. And I'm the kind of person where it's like, if I see a problem, I'm just going to try to solve that problem. And I have found that when I talk to residents, whether they've, been in Bed-Stuy for a long time or whether they're new, like, I think that resonates with people of just
Mhm.
like, it doesn't have to be this way and let's try to do something about it. And I think it's allowed me, I think, to build a lot of relationships with a lot of people as a result of that.
I mean, it's incredible what you've done. 110 members in 3 years, and, like, it's really hard to mobilize people.
Yeah, I think that especially in this community work, it takes energy. I think
Mhm,
your earlier point around like block associations, I think a lot of block associations are in some phase of dormancy.
mhm,
I think COVID is a big driver of that, and I think a lot of them are coming back from COVID. I think that the block, I mean, I felt like the block party season this year in Bed-Stuy was like really awesome.
mhm.
And I think that I feel like it's starting to come back, and the block party is such a tenet of like an event as to almost like why I think what many block associations sort of center around from
Mhm.
that point of view. But it takes time. It takes, a president who's like engaged and wants to do work and you're not getting paid for it. And so I think that makes it hard to get these things done. And the city certainly doesn't make it easier in some cases.
Mm. Sometimes I'm rushing out the door to get to work, and I really can't stop and talk, like, I'm running to the train,
Yeah.
and, like, I'll get like, "Tara!" And I'm like, Hi. And I'm like, I gotta go.
Yeah,
It's a lot. I like what you said about the news and the climate of politics, right? There's the helpless feeling is so intense of
It's nationwide.
it's a nationwide like collapse of feeling of agency. So I like your small problems. No one wants to look at the trash on the corner. How do we just do that thing? That thing.
totally. I think politics starts at your doorstep. It
Mhm.
starts at your doorstep. And I think that my experience with there's a lot of first off, there's a lot of good people who work in New York City governments. Like I feel like I've started to build friendships with people who work at NYPD, friendships who work at DSNY, friendships with some of the elected officials. Like I think individually there's a lot of very good people. I think that, New York City government is so big. There's
Mhm.
300,000 people, and it's such a large bureaucracy that it is very difficult for any of those people. And a lot of those people don't have decision-making power at the end of the day to
Mhm.
actually like truly solve your issue. Like I'm sure if the sanitation manager had the budget and had the authority to clean up Spencer Place Corner, I'm sure he would do it in a heartbeat.
Mhm.
Probably hates getting the phone call from you and being like, "Oh God, this is like still dirty." Like I'm guessing that that feels that way. But my vision for Better Block is that we like inspire a wave of people who are like one like actually solving problems in the community and committed to that and ensuring it truly gets solved, like ensuring
Mhm.
it the trash is no longer an issue at Spencer
Mhm.
Place at
Mhm.
Fulton, and then also finding ways to identify policy to fix that permanently. So one example of a policy that we're trying to develop right now is holding landlords more accountable for negligent behavior.
The vacant lots here, these people bought these vacant lots in like 1998
Yeah.
and they moved out of the city. They don't do anything. They don't take care of anything. And then they got their properties for so little that a few oath summons here and there, they don't care. Not a big deal for them. Not a big deal.
And so there's a group of like 4 to 5 of us in Better Block who are kind of diving deep into the problem. I think the things that we've learned so far is one, there's a lot of fines. New York City has a lot of fines, and the fine structure is actually quite complicated. Like whether it's sanitation or Department of Buildings or the health department, like there are all different kinds of ways you can get fined. The issue that they're having today is Oath, which is like the organization within the city who's kind of in charge of enforcing these fines, holding hearings for people to contest them, whatever that might be. They're only collecting about 30% of those fines. And there's been like a couple of articles about this, like New York Times did a big article in 2018 about it. There was another study from like I think the Independent Budget Office in like 2024 that showed there's I think $1 to $2 billion worth of fines that are outstanding, and a large percentage of that is the Department of Buildings fines that are just like not being collected. And so that's really where the gap is that there's a deterrent. These building owners get fines and then they don't really have to pay them, or they find a way around them. I've seen that in some of the vacant buildings that we've tried to improve where like the fine sits there, it never seems to be paid, and there doesn't really seem to be a consequence for it. And so really what we're trying to do and brainstorm is like, how do we ultimately ensure that like if a fine exists, it gets paid? Because full disclosure, I don't I don't see it as a source of revenue for the city. Like I
Mhm.
think the ideal world of the way fines work is like, the amount makes sense, it's clear to the owner, and it serves as a deterrent. Right?
Mhm.
It's hey, because I am not an anti-developer person. I'm all for
Yeah.
building housing.
Oh,
There are plenty of good developers out there who have good behavior, and I think
mhm.
that's fine. But there are a lot of people who are taking advantage of the system, who are being very, very negligent. And as neighbors, you have to bear the cost for it. And it's
Mhm.
years.
A
It is
hundred
years of
percent.
these buildings just sitting there and nothing happened with them. And I've learned a vacant space in New York City is a magnet for illicit activity. It's a
Yes.
magnet for it.
So speaking as someone who was a teenager in New York, we only drank in what we would call Bandos, which is literally abandoned buildings, and we would like sneak in on like ladders to these abandoned buildings and like drink in like a corner of an old abandoned building. So like nothing good is going on. I love how surprised she is.
This is
And
Fiona.
the
it was
first
like
time your mom is learning about this?
it would be like
Fiona.
it'd be like, let's go to the Bandos this weekend, like the abandoned building Bandos.
Fiona, you could hurt yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I have a 3-year-old daughter, and oh my God, one day.
It's really interesting how you can really get away. I'm like just shocked. Well, two things. One, if I leave my car in a space that isn't legal, I get a ticket. And I'm like, ugh, I have to pay it. I genuinely am just like, how is such a large percent of the population just doesn't deal with this? Like, they don't have to pay their oath, they don't have to get the ticket, they don't get towed. I'm genuinely mystified.
Totally. I mean, and it's fines. The fines are there's actually I don't know if this was from the New York Times study or from the Independent Budget Office study, but individuals do pay their fines at a higher rate than commercial. And you could
Mhm,
hear this with the story from residents. Like there was a woman who lived on our block at Claver who was getting fines for rats, and she had to repave her whole backyard garden as a
mhm,
result of this, which cost her thousands of dollars.
mhm,
And she's just a good person, right? And she's like, okay, the city's fining me. I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to try and do right by it. But there's a lot of people for where this is a business and they're like, okay, well, I know the city well enough to where I know the enforcement's going to take a really long time. I
mhm.
may not even own the building by the time this actually gets enforced. And so I just like don't really have to pay
Yeah.
this. And I think that that is not being a good neighbor. I
I
think
also
it's
think when you call 311 a lot and you use your name, you don't do it anonymously, I
yeah,
think they look at you. There's a deterrent to stop
yeah.
you. I genuinely, because I call 311 a lot on the corner,
Hmm.
and I got a summons for, like, n nothing. Like, they said I had some trash on my front lawn in the sidewalk, but within 18 inches of my fence, you know?
Yeah.
I'm shocked. I have a whole program. I have all my you know what I mean? It's the tidiest house. And, like,
And, like, literally next door, there's, like, mounds of trash.
yeah, and next door there,
Yeah.
and I got the summons, and I paid it, of course, immediately.
Yeah. That's frustrating. That's really frustrating.
But let's tip to the personal. People like you that take their time and go to community board meetings and do all this extra work when they're not working with, and you have children and are really special. What's the switch? I
What's the
mean,
driver?
you like solving problems. I got that, which is awesome and amazing. But like, what's the switch that you were like, this is like how I want to spend my time?
It's a good question. I also I often like try to sort of answer this for myself as well. I think I've always been like pretty entrepreneurial. Founded a company in the past and really enjoyed that experience. I think there's really two things. There's one, I really enjoy the process of like building something and like actually like trying to build Better Block into a real civic organization that actually like one like solves real problems in the community and then two like really passes policy. Like that process of building it into something is something that I
Mhm,
enjoy a lot.
mhm,
And then the second thing of like sort of why the problem that we're working on is I just don't think it has to be this way. I
mhm,
don't think it has to be this way. Like, I think the street can be clean. I think that the buildings can be, I think people can be held accountable. I think that, we can have a good bus stop that works. And I think the reason it is the way it is because of either the way enforcement works in the government or people not truly understanding the problems. Like a lot of things that like can be changed at different levers or like budget. There's thousands of reasons as to why these problems exist.
You think it's that our tax base is so low, like taxes are so much lower in Bed-Stuy, so we just don't get the services?
It's a good question. It's a good question as to like what's different about Bed-Stuy
Mhm.
versus the Upper East Side?
Yeah, like I go to Park Avenue and there's tulips and it's like so lovely. I'm just like, what's happening?
I I think in many cases it's private money in
Yes,
those
you're
locations.
right. You're
Like
right.
I don't know
Private
how
money. Yes.
I do think that's the case in a lot
Yeah.
of I think
I think
I
they
think it's a,
donate the
a
garden.
multiple of
They
things.
donate.
Yeah, I think the price of housing has priced out a lot of people in Bed-Stuy. And so as a
Mhm,
result, that has caused homelessness issues, which I think
mhm,
contributes to, issues in the streets or whatever that might be. I think that a lot of I have learned as I've gone deeper into New York City that like a lot of the like really nice parks in New York, the reason they're nice is because they're privately managed. Like I don't
mhm.
know if you're familiar with like Central Park Conservancy
Yeah,
and what
yeah,
they
yeah.
do. That's all privately funded. So if you're like, well, why isn't, every
Mhm.
park like Central Park? It's because well, they spend a lot of money on that.
Right.
And the High Line, 100% privately funded. And so I do think that like there's a lot of I haven't verified this in the Park Avenue case, but I think there's a lot of buildings and neighborhood associations that are spending a lot of money for their blocks to be that way. But I think in some cases it's laws. I think there's policy decisions that have been made that sort of allow negligent behavior to persist. I think in the vacant building policy example is like, we don't really enforce fines on building owners. And so as a result, many of them take advantage. And unless you have a neighbor like us who are calling on the phone about it, then nothing's going to happen. And even in that case, I've been calling to improve some of these buildings for a really long time, and they're still dirty and they're still allowed to get away with it. Like, it is remarkably hard to solve any of these issues.
Well, I commend you for trying to be the person to solve them. But what a main thing we like to talk about in the podcast is like for someone who's young and has that kind of like problem solving skill that they love doing, like how would you approach like learning how to like actually enforce the problem solving?
You mean it's ultimately like be more effective at it?
Or just like how did you become someone who knew that they like to solve problems and then was able to do it?
Can I just add a piece, which is like Fiona and I were talking about the job market for Gen Z is the most abysmal it's ever been.
Yeah.
These are 20, 21-year-olds that are about to go graduate and be in the world, right? And
Mhm.
I'm imagining you're probably like a millennial and
I am a
I'm
millennial. Yeah,
you're
I'm
a millennial.
37 now. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, right, a perfect millennial. I'm
Yeah.
Gen X and this one's Gen Z, Fiona.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like this intergenerational lens. Like, I want this podcast to be an artifact to say, this is a snapshot of the problems we're dealing with right now. And like, Fiona can look back at this in 10 years and say, I learned this thing about community engagement and what it takes and how to do a thing. And she can tell her friends, and they have like some best practice and wisdom to work with.
Totally. Totally. I think there's like, I don't know, as you think about like going into the job market, there's like three things that come to mind with me. One is like just like which profession you're going towards. Like there are just fact of life, there are some professions that make a lot more money than others. If you're going to go, work in finance, and you'll probably make a lot more money versus, doing community organizing. And that's just like the nature of how the world works. But I would say like, and I think you have to find whatever, profession you're thinking about is, basically what are you passionate about that sort of intersects with the world of work? What is the thing that excites you the most? And that could be healthcare, and that could be community organizing, that could be finance, that could be starting a business, science, whatever that might be. But it is, what are you excited about that intersects with the world of work, which, ultimately when it comes to the world of work, it's, there's a reason that you get paid, right? You're not always doing the thing that excites you, but you try to
Yeah.
find something where those things intersect as much as possible. And so the other two things I would say though are it, it really comes down to like curiosity and hard work. Those are the two most important things.
Mm.
I think with even effective change when it comes to Better Block, the way I was able to drive change with the vacant building was honestly just being curious. I did a lot of internet research trying to find out who the owner was.
Mhm.
I wasn't shy. I cold emailed them and had a call with somebody I didn't know on a Wednesday night and was just like, hey, what's going on? And I was just like curious and asking questions and asking more questions. And I think if you are a very curious person, regardless of what happens from a technology perspective,
Mhm.
I work in tech, so I'm naturally much more optimistic about what it's going to do for the world. But curiosity is always a differentiator. It's always a differentiator. And you have to be open to the fact that the job that you have right now may be different in 5 years or 7 years. But as long as you stay curious, like you're probably going to be successful. And then the second thing is just be somebody who works hard, you know? Be somebody who shows up, when you do your job, you take it seriously. That always makes a difference. And like I've managed people throughout my career. I've probably worked in like 5 different organizations. And like no matter what you do, if you are a curious, hardworking person, 99 times out of 100, you're going to be successful.
Yeah.
100%. And like I said, you choose your profession, and it's like, it's harder to sustain a living as an artist. That's just a fact of the world. But, and so you can ski downhill a little bit depending on your sort of financial situation of like which profession that you choose. But as long as you're a curious person and work really hard, then I think it sort of makes itself out for,
There-
it works out for itself.
There's some data now that says Gen Z values like work-life balance and like self-care more than any other generation. And then, so that's an interesting piece of data because my understanding is that your 20s and your 30s and you're into it's really not a time for work-life. That's when you build, 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 work extra hard. So these are two different ethoses. I'm like the Gen Z, like just grind it out, and then
Yeah.
die, which is not like not okay. You know what I mean?
I think you have to find what works for you, honestly. Like I am the kind of person who is very passionate about my career. Like I
Mhm.
really enjoy that. That's the thing that like drives me. And so I work-life balance is like just something I don't care about as much. Like I kind of just like always want to be busy. I think there are other people where work is work. You know, that's what it is. They're there for a paycheck. And what excites them is their family life, right?
Mhm.
And that's really what they're optimizing for. And I think that makes sense if that's what makes you happy. Like I think you really just have to find what balance sort of works for you based on what you're interested in. And I think you have to be really comfortable being that person because
Mhm.
oftentimes it can be very different from your friends or what people are telling you to do. And so I do think you have to answer that question for yourself and kind of be comfortable with that. And I think that's something I've learned a little bit more in the last 5 to 10 years is just like how I think about things differently from other people versus like when I was coming out of college, like I did what everybody did after school. I went into consulting because that was kind of one of the like approved careers that you did. And then I found out that I didn't really like it that much. And so I think I think it's really important to like answer that question for yourself and don't be afraid to be different from what your peers might be doing.
I did the Susie Welch thing where she has a values bridge and it helps you to define your values. And some people just genuinely don't value achievement via work as
Mhm.
much as helping others or family or a sense of belonging or just scope and traveling. And people's values are very different. And
Totally.
I didn't even understand this concept until it's like, oh, these are my values. Like I believe in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's have a moment as we're finishing up for you to plug future events, where how to join the Better Block Project and all of that stuff.
Yeah, of course. So if you're interested in learning about the Better Block Project, go to betterblockproject.com. I send out a weekly email every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. with the problems that we're working on and also any events that are coming up. Tomorrow in Herbert von King Park, we're doing this partnership with Beta NYC for what's called a Mapping for Equity event. It's really interesting. We're kind of mapping the park to see benches, lights, whatever that might be, in order to put in this open street map, which we can use to advocate for sort of more resources for the park and improving it. And then we're going to do an event to clean up trash on Fulton Street. And, you know, for one day on December 13th, we're going to make Spencer Place spotless, which
Yes.
I'm really excited.
Hey, I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. So that'll be fun. And yeah, we're continuing to grow and anyone is welcome. And, you know, also appreciate people's thoughts on what we're doing. We're sort of growing and learning. And yeah, it's awesome to be here with y'all today. I appreciate the interest.
Now I'm
Thank you.
inspired to have a proper block party and get a band and make it.
December 14th when it's clean.
Yeah. The block party block parties are the best. It's
I'm
really,
kind
that
of a
was
jerk. I'm like, let's just tackle the issues. And it's like, no, we actually have to have a fun stuff too, you know?
It's
Yeah.
it's good to have fun, and I
Mhm.
think that, like, it's nice. It's also, like, I don't know, just going to the second half of July to August in Bed-Stuy is just really fun with all
Mhm.
the parties that are happening. It's a very good time of year, so
Like the
I highly
city's been
recommend it.
marinating all summer and now it's like, woo.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, David, this was wonderful. We admire you and excited to be in your midst and learn from you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I love this. It was great talking to y'all.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.